Mark Sands, welcome to the Preconstruction Podcast.
Well, thank you, Gareth. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Good, man. Looking forward to it. Mark Sands, you're up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. How is the weather?
It's a beautiful day here in Grand Rapids. We love our summers. Struggled through the winters at times.
Oh, I bet you love your summers after a torturous winter. Brilliant. Glad to hear it. So listen, what I'm going to do usually, and I said this to you before, Mark, usually I ask the guests to introduce themselves and give them a background, but we have got so much to get through that I want to condense it. I'm going to give everybody a quick rundown on your background. Very simply, operations manager at the White's Company for 5 years. Then you were VP at the Christman Company for over 7 years. And then 2013, I think it was January, you founded Building Catalyst, and you're now founder of Building Catalyst. Let's talk about that moment when you decided, and you were in the Christman Company, and you decided, you know what, as VP, I'm going to step away from this beautiful industry, wonderful salary, lovely life, and I'm going to take the chance on Building Catalyst. How did that come about?
Well, I'd say that, yes, it's a beautiful industry. I loved working for the Christman Company. It's exciting to be involved in construction projects. But early on in my career, I just was somehow captured with this idea that the construction could operate much better. I was frustrated with the fragmentation and all the dysfunction that seemed to pervade. Actually, when I was a young man, I was brought in as a project manager. I was brought in on a bid day, and we ended up working on a major science center for University of Michigan, submitting a proposal. And in the flurry of the last few moments, we ended up using the electrical contractor's phone number as his bid, and ended up being. And I was, I just created an incredible paradigm shift. I says, how can grown men, actually, survive, with this, this kind of risk that we're dealing with.
And the scary thing about that, Mark, that's probably not the last time that's going to happen.
Oh my gosh, it was back in the day, before even fax machines and everything. I mean, I've talked to different guys about, writing a book on Midday stories. It would just be a fascinating book. So I'd encourage listeners maybe you could have a little podcast on Midday stories someday.
I love it. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to start it as soon as we get off this podcast. I'm going to stick it on LinkedIn, and I'm going to say, right, the best Midday story. We got to have a prize. What's the prize, Mark? A free, a free membership to Building Catalyst for a year.
10 years.
Oh, I love it. Brilliant. Cool. Yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you there. So you were the penny had dropped. So you were fed up using electrical contractors' phone numbers.
Exactly. So as time rolled on, and I was really interested in researching and studying the problem that was so pervasive in the construction industry, I ran across a guy named Deming that we'll talk about hopefully later if we have time. And he just really set me on a course of thinking like a system. He really transformed manufacturing, but just by simply using a management philosophy that was organized around systems theory. So I became a systems thinker, and fast forward to 2013, after a few decades of still muscling through the way we do business, I decided to create Catalyst that, in essence, creates a system out of the building process.
Brilliant. I love it. And you mentioned there Deming. When were you introduced to him, and did you implement that at the Christman Company? Well, as much of it as possible.
So in the early 1990s, so we're going way back, I was one of the owners of Christman on the board and so forth. And I made an appeal to my employer to consider applying Deming's management philosophy. It's really called the system of profound knowledge, and then 14 management principles. And I honestly didn't do a very good job of explaining it and presenting it, and so it's all on me. Christman's outstanding company continues to be to this day, but I was unable to really create a compelling case for Deming.
No,
but
and listen, you know yourself, to do that and having just known Deming and understood the philosophy, it would have been very difficult to go in and start teaching people it. So that's understandable. But when you were talking and kind of gearing up for building Catalyst, what was the idea in your head? Because obviously you hear it all the time with founders and co-founders of technology companies. The idea that they originally have is probably not the idea that they have at the end. So what was that idea in 2013?
Yeah. So the idea really was to integrate and automate the entire construction process from end to end, from the very onset of a project to the completion of the project. But you have to start somewhere, and the best place to start is in the planning stages. And I had an amazing opportunity. I probably should have been included in the introduction, but back in 2000 to 2010, I was very involved with what's today called manufacturing inspired or industrialized construction. So the Steelcase is the world's largest manufacturer of interior office systems. And they came up with this idea of producing turnkey all the way from the entrance into the parking lot all the way to the desk of the employee in an office building, a complete systems approach to construction. How would a manufacturer produce a building? And it was a fascinating experience to still really see how a manufacturer would approach the building process. And I just learned an enormous amount. And really, it all has to focus from the inside out. It has to focus on that employee at the desk, or that patient, in a patient room, or that student in a classroom. And then just everything supports, that purpose, that function. And so that tied into Deming's theory. Deming defines a system as a network of interdependent components all working together to accomplish the aim of the system. So the whole idea of Catalyst then becomes start with what the building purpose is, what the aim of the system is, and that's basically the functions, that classroom or that patient, organized by departments. And then the whole, building then needs to support that purpose. And building Catalyst then has been built to take the owner's business case, the building purpose, plus the constraints. Where is the building located? How tall is it? What are the soil conditions? What are the other demands? Is it a private owner or public owner? What is the quality level? And to be able to take the owner's business case plus all of those attributes, and then effectively predict the space program, predict the design massing of the building, predict the schedule, and then predict the cost in a fairly significant level of detail. And that level of detail on the cost side goes down to what we would refer to as uniform at level 3 in most cases. So pretty detailed estimate that or cost model. We'd like to use the word cost model rather than estimate. Estimate is connotes an estimator taking off quantities from a drawing and then applying unit prices to it. A cost model actually then produces the outcomes, the cost outcomes, before there's any drawings, before there's even a space program, perhaps, and that. So it really creates a model from the very inception, of a project idea.
Brilliant. So basically what you're saying, it's got to be a systems approach rather than a siloed approach, which the construction industry has been like for the last, for eternity since it
Forever.
started. Yeah, exactly. And how difficult, because that's a huge shift. I mean, that is a massive shift going from one to the other. Can that be done in steps, or is it a case of you've got to rip everything up and start again?
So, and we'll get to a little bit more, but we have to start with critical data. There's what's referred to as the Pareto Principle. And what we've discovered is that with a relatively few number of data entities, we can very accurately, predict what the outcomes of the project are. There's way too many, too much granularity, too much detail, too much information in a project to try to, bite off the whole elephant. We have to start with what's referred to as the most critical data. And that, even for a large complex hospital, might only be about 150 to 200 data entities. And so, versus the tens of thousands of, the data entities that ultimately would, exist in all of the data sources, once the project is completed.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because a lot of people listen to this. There's ENR top 58 companies. There's companies that are just starting up. There's companies that have been going 100 years, and they all think about the pre-construction data, the data conversation, as a pain in the head, or a pain in the arse, as we like to call it. But you're right in what you're saying is, if they haven't started the data journey, or they're halfway through the data journey, you can start it at a very, very high level. Like, the data points don't have to be tens of thousands. What is that the biggest misconception? Is that the biggest mistake that you're seeing on the contractor side?
Well, yes. Yeah, it's very hard really for estimators to really think in terms of a system. They don't really are able to think about the owner's business case, the classroom or the patient room. Some of the more sophisticated builders have been able to start, doing conceptual estimating, maybe by department, maybe, by an inpatient wing, or surgery, or, maybe science lab, or a hotel room, and that kind of thing. But by and large, for the day-to-day construction, it's really hard, for estimators really to, to think in those terms of the owner's business case. And so that's the main thinking that has to happen. And really, I believe it has to start at the very top. I think that one of the reasons you contacted me is you learned about Catalyst through a presentation that the Bolt Company presented at the Preconstruction Conference down in Phoenix a few weeks ago. And so the Bolt Company's upper management, was very involved with the Lean Construction Institute, and one of their co-founders, Glenn Ballard, and Glenn, was on a worldwide search for a solution that could accurately predict project outcomes before, the design process. And the Bolt Company actually had developed their own internal, tool to do that, maybe department by department, and, and so forth. The only other solution that Glenn had found worldwide was in Finland. It was
Interesting.
a tool called Taku by Hatala. And their approach is different than Catalyst, but it is amazing, technology that it really is very predominant in, I think, Finland specifically, I think growing in Scandinavia perhaps. But then I presented Catalyst idea to the Lean Congress several years ago, and Glenn came to me and invited me into this research initiative, with the Bolt Company. And then the Bolt Company saw that, and then they rapidly, in 2017, adopted building catalyst, and has been very instrumental, especially in healthcare.
Brilliant, Mark. So yeah, in 2017, obviously the Bolt Company then take on Catalyst, which is amazing because they've used Catalyst on over 300 projects to date, which is incredible. Then in 2019, you did something, I don't know whether this was in the plan, the overall strategy, but you did something interesting. You integrated all of the data together. So all of the contractors that were using Catalyst, you put the data together and allowed them to use it all. What was the thoughts behind that?
Well, actually, aggregating data from lots of different contractors started, back even in 2015 and 2016, and we were still operating with what we refer to as this nucleus of critical data, and that would be synonymous with like a uniformat level, in the cost standard. And then in 2019, we really wanted to take that nucleus of critical data that all resided within the Catalyst system and expand that to integrate with the design, which would be Revit, Autodesk Revit, with this programming and equipment purchasing, and we used a tool called DeRofus data management, and then also integrate with estimating programs. And on a pilot project for Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation Hospital, we did that with a local contractor using I2 CostX, which had a plugin that made for a natural integration, an easier, a better data exchange between Revit and the estimating program. And then all of that then rolled back up into Catalyst, and Catalyst becomes the central hub, where all the data is then integrated to.
Brilliant. And what, obviously that's of great benefit to all the general contractors, especially the large ones. Was there any pushback on that philosophy when someone's signing up to use Catalyst? Are they saying, "Oh, I'm not too comfortable sharing my data with my competitors or other contractors throughout the US"? I'm sure that came up in conversation.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it is the hot topic. Thanks for mentioning that. Even at the critical data, most large mega builders, they really super resist sharing data, even though the data is completely secure, totally anonymous and everything. They just can't get over that that particular hurdle. Now, the Bolt Company, thankfully, isn't one of those, and we have a number of other builders that have contributed data, and it's and that's been good. But then even when we wanted to go from this critical data stage into the detailed data stage with a local architect and builder, it was very difficult. I'd have to admit that they really struggled with the idea of just changing the way they were thinking. And the other thing I should mention, and that is that the idea of Catalyst, maybe coming back to an earlier question, was not really to do cost modeling in the first place. The idea of Catalyst was really to eliminate waste, and we have to automate if we're going to eliminate waste. But the other thing that's really important, Gareth, is we do have to change the way we reward construction contracts. Right now, the CM or the builder's fee is based on the cost of the project. They can generate income on billable hours as well. And so there's very little motivation to really reduce cost and reduce effort in that. And so on this particular pilot project, the whole idea was to really capture all of their potential profit that they could make on a project, and just set that aside, and then really encourage them through incentives to eliminate waste, to apply automation, and to generate potentially more income through eliminating billable hours, eliminating cost, finding better solutions to drive waste out of the process. And I would say that technically it was a success, but I'd say philosophically and just, really more practically, it was really hard, to grasp.
Yeah.
There.
And
But
what you're talking there about the change in the way of thinking construction and getting rid of waste, that comes back to the lean manufacturing process or ideology from Deming again. Do you think that that's achievable? Obviously, listen, in an ideal world, I think it would work better, but how much of a shift would that be from how we're currently doing it?
yeah, I absolutely think, I know for sure that it's attainable. Yes, Gareth, I firmly believe that the industry can change, wants to change, and is able to. I think it is going to take owners to really adopt this kind of methodology first, because really the problems are created in the planning and the programming and the design stages, that we still operate very one-off-ish. We reinvent the wheel in those early planning stages. And so the technology we've created really organizes all of that, puts all of that planning, that space programming into, a system. And then if we can then deliver to the builders, much more organized and structured and consistent data, then I think that they are going to be in a much better place to then structure their own data according to, these standards. And basically standardization is absolutely the key to automation and to, waste removal. And the architects, the hair on the back of their heads, stands up when you talk about that, because that kind of connotes okay, we're going to just be totally production architects and stuff. And I say, no, you can still produce wonderfully custom, unique projects, but the exam room is still mostly standardized, and and the toilet rooms are mostly standardized, and the classroom, all of those are can really be submitted to what we refer to as kind of a kit of parts, and even within those you can do some customization and all of that. But if we are going to truly eliminate waste, we have to standardize, we have to automate. The whole management philosophy and systems approach that Deming created to transform manufacturing, all those principles can absolutely work. We've proven it initially with this critical data. We've shown technically that it's totally possible, at the detailed data level where we're integrating these other technologies. And so it's very exciting. It would be so much fun, for any highly innovative builder to strap on this vision. But it'd be much easier for them to do if the information they received from the owner and from the architect was first structured and submitted to the same system. So we've been collecting lots of data. We've been doing all of the stitching together these technologies. We've been proving that technically all of it's possible, but now it's time really for us to go and approach the owners and invite them in and see if they can see the vision, and that they can really encourage their space programmers and their designers to submit to consensus standards, and then just continue the data research from there. So yes, it's totally doable.
Yeah. So do you think it's has to come from the owner then, or do you think the contractors have to go and prove it, show it on maybe 3 or 4 projects, and then deliver it to future developers and owners? Or do you think the owner's got to stand out and go, right, this is the way we're going to do it, this is the way I want you to do it? Surely it has to come from the GC or the contractor.
Yeah. Okay, so Deming says true innovation has to come from the building producer. It can't come from the customer. So when we really get to the transformation, the builders, in my mind, have to lead that initiative. However, the owners, because they have so much influence in making requirements of their consultants, and their designers, I think they're going to be the ones that are really going to create the inducement and maybe even perhaps demand improvement and demand measurable waste reduction. And that's what Catalyst platform enables, is this measurable waste reduction process. So I'm working with a couple of builders who are actually structuring their data, based on the Catalyst standards. They will, I think, emerge as leaders, in this movement. But truly, I think we do need the owners who are really suffering from, kind of these outrageous costs, who are really want to do something about it, to work together, with us and these builders too. So I'm really, and here's the thing, Gareth, as we mentioned earlier, and that is that building Catalyst has so much power and provides so much knowledge and information and insight and decision-making capability before the builder ever gets involved in a project, right? So, from the very napkin, sketch, or even in the early feasibility study, building Catalyst becomes very effective right up front. So, now I would say that the Bolt Company, for example, they can use Catalyst to be introduced into the project much earlier, and owners are, really seeing that and tapping, on that resource because of their, ability to use Catalyst. But I think that we do need to, get Catalyst in the, being used by the owners and the owner representatives at the very early stages of a project.
And that's what I love about the next thing. I want to talk about how it was used in the Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation Hospital in Michigan. How did that come about? Talk us through that as a project, how Catalyst was able to spearhead that. Because I know it was a first live systems approach, and it was integrated and automated, and it integrated and automated the pre-construction process. So talk to us about that as an example.
Okay, so and this is a fascinating story. I can't get into the details, but the president of Mary Free Bed, a rehabilitation hospital, his background was construction.
Brilliant, love it.
And in fact, he was one of the co-developers for steel cases, manufactured inspired construction process. So, and then I worked closely with him, back in those steel case, and then the product name was called Workstage, to develop this manufacturing inspired process, construction process. And so then when he went on to Mary Free Bed, for circumstances we just, probably can't get involved in that discussion right now, but he really wanted to solve the problem. He was just, kind of extremely concerned with the cost uncertainty and that. And so he brought me in and with building Catalyst, and we tested it on some of their projects, and it proved to be true. And so then I proposed to Mary Free Bed, well, let's take this to a whole new level, where we take it from this critical data, stage into, the details, and stitch together these different technologies that I mentioned before, DeRofus data management, and Autodesk Revit, and then I2 Costex estimating, and then having that all integrated with with Catalyst. And we ended up engaging a longtime friend, advocate, visionary, who's a Revit guru. His name is Mark Dietrich in Pittsburgh, and we worked together, with these other technologists and the design and construction team to put this system into place. And it worked. It calculated. Unfortunately, the project was put on hold. Reasons outside our control, but by the time it was put on hold, we had actually technically proved that we can integrate and automate the planning, the space programming, and the design process. So even today, with all our wonderful technologies, contractors still have to, they can use some aids like Autodesk Assemble to try to, extract information out of the design model, but then they really still have to manually, take all those line items and apply unit cost to them and that. So it becomes just a little bit better, but sometimes it's more effort than it's worth. So very few contractors actually ever do that. And we took that to a whole new level of having that data flow right through Revit, into the estimating system, and based on a cost catalog that, we established, for the project. So it was just just kind of a huge, I think, breakthrough, really technically for the construction industry. And now, of course, we have to find that next owner that's willing to lead like Mary Freebed to insist that happens. Now, to your point too, because your audience is mostly contractors, I think a contractor that sees the same vision and studies does a study of what we did at Mary Freebed. If they capture the vision, they could then go to their owners that are trying to solve the same problem, and then really put together a presentation and a proposal to take what we did at Mary Freebed, to the next level.
Brilliant. And do you see much of that happening, Mark? Because obviously you've been going at this for a while, and you're looking and speaking to contractors on a daily basis. Are you seeing people putting that together, that sort of system that was at Mary Freebed?
No, not whatsoever. I see absolutely no evidence of it. And I don't think there ever will be until there's something like Catalyst that puts all of the critical data into a system. And that system is driven by the owner's business case.
Yeah.
So if they can't, really, drive the predictions based on that owner's business case, they really, don't have, I think, the what it takes in order to automate the whole process. You can't build a high performance automated system on a dysfunctional, broken, planning foundation. The whole thing has to be set up in the early planning stages. The system has to be created. The standards, the data standards have to be established up front, and all of the data then has to submit back up into the owner's business case. There's no way we can compare an exam room in New York City to Huntsville, Alabama, if it's all amalgamated into one whole project, but it can be, that exam room in those two locations can be, if those are the basic building blocks that we're working from, rather than the whole building as a building block that contractors just have not, been able to accomplish that data system that allows them to reckon with what's going on inside the building. Because the intensity of design, the intensity of cost between the the different functions of what's going on inside the building are just enormous, and nobody's really been able to figure that out at the functional level. I mentioned earlier that some companies, and Bolt did even before Catalyst, are really trying to make sense of what a departmental square foot cost might be. But even within the departments, the variation can be dramatically different. The cost for an MRI or a CT scanner is totally different than the cost for like an ultrasound or some other diagnostic function there. So no, the answer to your question is until a complete system of critical data that is totally organized according to the owner's business case, until we can get to that point, I don't think that we can accomplish this complete, pre-construction integration and automation.
Yeah, and me and you both know that there are E&R top 10 companies doing this alone. They're doing this themselves, and they're close to it. The likes of Mortensen, Skanska, they're doing these data solutions and trying to get these systems in place. And I think they're pretty close. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, I think they can get closer. I believe. And but I think that it's still going to be a stretch. I don't think they really haven't been able to, and in the way we've designed Catalyst, we don't need to either, but I don't know if they've been able to really then take data from their completed projects and roll it back into their predictability tools, based on, department by department.
Yeah, and that's where the real magic happens, isn't it, Mark? That's when you get stronger, you get better, and as an industry, things get easier. The risk goes down, the waste goes down, and everything gets so-called and more transparent. We can become more collaborative, and projects become, especially within pre-construction estimating, projects become easier to deliver.
Yeah, exactly. So even the firms you've mentioned there, they can make a lot more progress if they can simply structure their data. Now, Uniformat, does provide the means to do it, but currently I don't know any contractor that has, even the big guys who have effectively been able to code their detailed estimates, to any kind of a system, and then code their buyout, when they get their trade contractors. In the Catalyst world, we have to take the detailed schedule of values of actual costs, and take, that Mason contract, for example, and then break that back down into Uniformat, so the projects are bought out in CSI master format, but that data has to be then translated back into Uniformat in order to be submitted to a complete system.
Yeah.
And I think that actually is huge, a huge breakthrough that would accomplish. And I think that, those, well, we'll see. It hasn't happened yet.
Love it. I can't wait. When it happens, Mark, I want you to ring me first and get you on the podcast to tell us all about it.
All right.
So,
well, we are working with a couple of contractors that are, pursuing it. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. Now, listen, Mark, I see it all the time. I mean, the people come on the podcast. The reason I ask about Skanska, we've had a lot of their pre-construction team, their data solutions team on the podcast, and they're working towards it. And I think they're pretty close. And that's the issue that I have. There's so many good. Now, they don't have to be in our top 50 contractors. I'm talking about small contractors that are only 10 years old. These guys are putting a lot of emphasis on pre-construction and data points in particular, and they are killing it. And there's a lot of old companies they're not thinking pre-construction data, historical data, and they're not thinking technology, and they're getting left behind. And it just pains me to do that. They're losing people because of it. They're losing projects because of it, and they're putting themselves under serious pressure risk-wise because of it. So we need people to talk about it more. We need people to share stories about it more to get us up to speed. Because once everyone's up to speed on data, on technology, then it's all about value engineering and the people that they hire and the culture that they provide their people that will be the best companies. And that's what we're trying to get. Just to go back as well in that ideal format, you said it helps. We talked about the project delivery method. So IPD and Design Build. I'm seeing a huge shift towards that, negotiated design build. How important is that when it comes to the ideology of Catalyst?
It's absolutely essential. It has to be fully integrated. Now, IPD is a good idea, and design build is, I think, even better. But still, the architect's data is still one-offish. That's built in Revit, and the contractor's data is still one-offish. And IPD and Design Build provide the only contractual framework to cause the architect, engineer, and the builder to be working off of the same data standard. Yeah. They are not working on the same data standard. And so those two contracting methods really provide the impetus, but they still got to get there. And that's what we've been obsessing about, is creating one data standard. And the data standard is across all kinds of data groups. So it's the data standard starts with the owner's business case. Then that data standard continues with the actual room standards. Now that's been tried to be accomplished with Omni-class schedules 11 and 13, but they just, it's almost there. It's not quite there, and so architects really don't use it, or space planners really don't use it consistently. Then we get into the design parameters, and into the schedule, and then finally the cost. And then, very importantly, are this whole data category called attributes. And attributes are huge. They're so important that we need to know if this building is in a seismic class A or if it's in a seismic class D. We need to know if it's in a in a hot temperate or if it's in a cold temperate. We need to know what is the quality standard. We need to know what the operability. Is this building the emergency systems only supporting critical systems, or is the building have to be fully operable, or does there have to be redundancy? Does built into the life safety systems and the operation of the building and that kind of thing. So this whole idea of attributes that really drive outcomes have to be considered, in the total data system.
Brilliant. And then across sectors, industry sectors, is the data standards the same? So aviation, healthcare, manufacturing, like a pharmaceutical, like all multifamily, is that the case across everything?
Well, we have to be able to have a filter. So when for example, in Catalyst, if you select a healthcare, an inpatient facility, it knows that nurse call ought to be one of the checkboxes. Yeah. For example, and special medical systems ought to be one of the checkboxes. If you select an industrial project and you get into the attributes, you don't want nurse call to even show up. So the answer is yes. Globally, we need to be working off of one data standard, that But within particular market sectors, there would be a filtering of the applicable selections within those attributes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, perfect sense. Absolutely. There's probably a core, and then there's filters after that as well. And then tell me now, Mark, obviously this all sounds very exciting, specifically Catalyst. What's next for Catalyst? What excites you? What are you guys working on right now? Obviously you're working with your current contractors, but what else? Is there any variations coming out? Is there any add-ons?
Yeah. So clearly, the most vital need there, and the most exciting thing is structuring data and working with the contractors in structuring this data. And so in the past, over the last several years, I mean, we've recorded just dozens and dozens and dozens of projects at a very detailed level, but we've had to kind of manually condition all that data, right? So that's really not sustainable. So for Catalyst to become sustainable, we really need a core of building companies that are submitting to this data standard, so that you don't have to manually go through and recondition the data. The data rides for free, at the end of or even at buyout. Or then again, at the end of the project, that data just can be automatically, imported into Catalyst and then submitted to, the big data sample to continue to refine and improve the predictability. What's awesome is to, find, projects where you see variations, and I'm a geek, right? So I love to find variation. I like to see where there's a huge difference between the predicted outcome and the actual outcome, and then start asking the question, why does that variation exist? And then when we answer that question, why that variation exists, we got a new attribute. We have a new cause, a new reason for why, things vary so much. And to raise up a generation of, young, professionals that are equally as, interested in solving this problem, this Deming problem. But Deming, at the end of the day, said, basically, if I had to boil down my whole message, it's all about reducing variation. And and that's what we need to do. We need to raise up a generation of professionals within the construction industry that are obsessed with reducing variation.
Love it. I will cheers to that. And then Mark, we've got, also, I mean, we did a podcast on it last week with Will Center. Everyone's talking about AI and ML, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Where do you see that plugging into Catalyst and helping Catalyst?
Well, yeah, and I've talked to my partners are both software developers, and they cringe, when I talk about machine learning and AI. But then, now that, that we've kind of experienced how we have to manually do this calibration process, we can actually use some more of the machine learning principles to automatically calibrate, rather than having, technologists do the calibration there. Now, truly, in the sense of AI, that's beyond me how any computer system, any AI solution could go out and sniff out the variations that exist between the different departments that's going on in the building. AI is going to it's going to be a major player in different areas, maybe of making available just a whole bunch of building solutions that could be considered, rather than a human having to go out and, finding those solutions. But I've been kicking around this idea. It's almost like the Amazon approach to construction. That is, someone could just go on, log in to something like Catalyst and just start answering questions. And within a few minutes, it wouldn't give you anywhere near the detail that Catalyst provides, but within a few minutes, the owner could know what his building should cost, or how long it's going to take, or how big it should be. And then the perfect test is for an owner or an owner's representative to go in and just, just answer those same questions for a project they just completed and see what the results are compared to what the, predictions would be. And they go, whoa, we spent how many hundreds of thousands of dollars of manual effort, and the computer could do that in a matter of minutes, or something.
Yeah, that's the scary part of it, and it's also the trust side of it as well. But you're only able to do that with the data if the data is structured properly and what they're reading and what they're gathering, and how they're coming to that number, and then obviously the story behind the number as well. I'm sure the owner wants to know. He just doesn't want a number shoved in his face going, "This is what it's going to cost you." He wants a story on how it's going to be built and how you're going to value engineer it. But it's exciting times. There's no doubt about it. I agree with you. It's going to be exciting both on the AI and the ML side of things. Well, listen, Mark, that was absolutely fantastic. I mean, as you said, a lot of our listeners come from the contractor side. So if there is anybody listening now, Mark, and they're listening to this podcast and thinking, you know what Mark's talking about, I need help with this, I'm interested in Catalyst, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I would say get on our website, www.buildingcatalyst.com, go to contacts, and there's basically it's info@buildingcatalyst.com. We'll get to someone, and that will get to me ultimately as well, and would love to, continue the discussion. I do really just quickly want to come back to your point. You've mentioned, and you're, having these podcasts with like Mortensen and Skanska and these awesome companies, and truly I know that they're doing wonderful things out there. My admonition and my what's exciting to me is they're probably in uniformat, at least on the cost side, and as long as they're doing that, then they are, and they're being true to the cost standards there, then that data is going to be live data, instead of dead data, and the whole idea of live data, is amazing. And then, perhaps one day I'd be excited to work with, those firms, because what they're doing now, it sounds like, is going to make, the collaboration that you were mentioning earlier, going to be, so much more doable.
Yeah, and absolutely. And that's what we need, Mark. We need all you bright minds in the one room to make our life a little bit easier so that we can deliver more projects on time and under budget.
Amen. That's it. Nailed it.
Mark, it's been an absolute...
I want to go a step further.
Yeah.
On time and on budget doesn't solve our cost problem. It's very important on a particular project, but if we just make our budgets high enough and our schedules long enough, then it's easy to make them. The whole idea of Catalyst is to reduce the cost and reduce the time, globally.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah. Amen to that. That's a great finishing line.
Yeah. Thank
Brilliant.
you so
and listen,
much.
I know that this is not going to be the last time we're going to have you on. I know that there's going to be, probably in around 12 months' time, we're going to get you back on, talk about Catalyst, talk about the progress that you've made, and talk about some of those success stories.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love it. Thanks for the opportunity. Mark. I appreciate what you're doing.
You're welcome, Mark. Talk to you soon.